Today we are going to discuss another important interview question. What is the scope and different types of the scope that is available in JavaScript. So let's get started. First, what is scope? Scope in JavaScript is nothing but is an accessibility of a variable, functions and object in some particular part of our code during the runtime. First, we will discuss about global scope. Global scope is nothing but a variable those are declared outside the function can be accessible anywhere in the program, even inside the different functions. Such variables are known as a global scope. Let's get started with a global scope example. Let's declare a variable, let x is equals to 10, and let's create a function, my function, and let's console.log value inside the function. Let's see x, and let's call the function my function, and let's see console.log of value outside the function. Next, so if we run the program and see what is the output we will be getting here. Let's run the program. Scope.js, we see value inside the function is 10 and the value outside the function is also 10. Now let's try to change this value inside the function. Let's say x is equals to 20. Okay, and I will write one more console log here before I call the function. Console.log before function call, and see what is the value that we will be getting. With the global scope, we will be able to modify the variable those are declared in a global scope. If they are declared with a let keyword, if it is a const, then you know right that we won't be able to reassign a value to a const variable. Now let's run the program and see what is the output we will get. Here you will be able to see. First, let we have a function. When the code gets run, first we call before function call. So what is before function call? Before function call, the value of x is 10, and the value inside the function call, that is nothing but first when the code gets run, this particular line gets executed and it will print the value of x is nothing but 10, and then the function gets called. Once this function gets called, inside this function we have a value inside the function that is nothing but x, which is this one, and once this function gets executed, we are reassigning a value to our x that is nothing but 20. So once this function gets executed, the value outside of the function, that is nothing but after the function execution, the value of the x get updated to the 20. So that's why we are getting a value here as a 20. So this is all about a global scope. The value, whichever the value you are declaring outside of the function, that value can be accessed anywhere inside the function. And if the value is declared with a let, then you will be able to reassign a value to that variable. So this is an example, and this is all about a global scope. Now let's get started with a function scope. Function scope. In JavaScript, variable declared inside a function using a var, let or the const have a function scope, meaning they are only accessible within that function. Now let's just see this with an example. Let's create a function my function my function scope, and let's declare a variables where x is equals to 10 and let y is equals to 20, const z is equals to 30. Let's access this variable inside the function. Console.log function scope. Let's clear this quickly. function scope inside the function, and let's access them x, comma y, comma z, and let's try to access these variables outside of the function. Console.log functions function scope variable outside the function. Oh, we forgot to call a function. Let's call a function my function scope. Okay, let's run the program. Console Z. Before that, let me just comment out the global scope example so that you won't get confused, and let's run the program. You see function scope inside the function. Inside the function, we are able to access all these variables. But, oh, my bad, I have not given the X variable outside. Let's just call this variable as well. Let's just try to access this variable outside of the function. Okay, let's clear the terminal and rerun our program one more time. So we got an error. Let's see. The moment JavaScript run the program, that is nothing but the moment it comes to the line number 28, and then when it calls this function, at that point of the time, what it does, x is not defined. The moment it call the function, yeah. So when the JavaScript run the program, first the variable gets occupied and then the function call gets happen. So it does not wait for your function to get called. We got the error saying x is not defined. So what happens in the JavaScript, the moment we run our code, it comes to the line number 28 before even makes the function call, and it sees whether xyz is there or not. Xyz, no, xyz, we have not at all declared any xyz variable outside of the function, and then the function call gets happen. So before even it gets called happen, it sees the variable xyz is not have been declared outside of the scope, and hence it will throw an error saying reference error x is not defined. But let me just try to give this outside of this one, and let's see what is the output that we will be getting. Let's clear the terminal and run the program one more time. We got the error now, y is not defined. So last time we got x is not defined, but now we are getting a y is not defined. So that is an example for a function scope. Let's just keep this. Let's try to keep all these variables now outside of this function and try to access them. Let's clear the program and rerun the program. Now we got the output of all these three. So in the JavaScript, variable those are declared inside the function can only be accessed inside the function, and they cannot be accessed outside of the function. That is nothing but our block scope. That is nothing but a function scope. That is nothing but a function scope in JavaScript. Now let's see what is a block scope in the JavaScript. Block scope are the variables which are declared inside the loops and the condition statement. Let and the const are the block scope. Variable declared within the block scope can be accessible within that block itself, and it cannot be accessed outside the block. If we try to access the block scope variable outside of the block scope, then it will throw us the reference error. What I mean is, let's get started with an example. Let's create a function my block scope, and let's call the function before we see the example, and let's declare a variable. Let x is equals to 10. Now this is the function scope. Now we will have some condition. Okay, let's say true now, and let's declare another variable. Let y is equals to 1000, and we will try to console log the value of x inside this if statement. So whatever the code you will be writing within this curly braces is considered as a block. So these curly braces with your condition is nothing but your block, your block scope. So let's console log and try to access the value x. With the x, we will be able to access a variable those are declared within that function. Now let's try to console log let's try to access the value which is declared within the if block. Okay, console.log value of y outside the condition block, block, and let's try to access it. Okay, let's save the program. So let's see what is the output that we will be getting in a terminal. Let's run the program. We got a reference error. Let's see what is the error. It says we got the reference error, y is not declared. Here we see the console.log value of the y outside of the block scope is error. So let's, whatever the value we are declared inside the block scope, we won't be able to access them outside of the block, but we will be able to access those variables which are inside the block. Let's try to access this variable value of x and again value of y. So let me comment out this and try to run the program. When I ran the program, I got the value of the x is 10 and the value of the y is 100. So any variable those are declared outside of your block is considered here as a function scope, and those variable we will be able to access inside the block scope. But whereas the variable those are declared inside the block scope, these are considered as a block scope, can be accessed only within that block, and we won't be able to access them outside of that block. And how about the global scope that we learned earlier? Like for example, say let first name is equals to Raj. Since the variable is declared outside of the function and it is a global in our program, and we will try to access them outside it. Let's say uh, console.log first name, first name. So first name, we are able to access them inside of our function, and we will change this function name inside our block. Now let's say first name is equals to hello JavaScript, and we will console log this first name and we'll see what is the output that we will be able to get. Console.log, and no, I'll try to console this log over outside of my function. Console.log global scope, first name, and we'll try to access the first name. So what do you think that we will be getting an output? Let's run our code. Let's clear the terminal first and let's run the code. Okay, the moment I run my program, first it says the first name is Raj, the function here. Line number 42 got executed. When it called the function, it the first console log, it prints the line number 32, first name as a Raj, and then it prints the value of this we have given a true. So it comes inside the if block and it prints the value of x and the y. The value of the x is 10 and the value of the y is 100, and then we are changing our global scope variable of Raj inside this block scope to hello world. And when we finally the program runs the execution, then we can see the global scope of the first name has got changed to a JavaScript. So this is all about what we have learned earlier: global scope, function scope, and the block scope example. Now we will be moving to our next scope, which is most important, known as an lexical scope. A lexical scope in JavaScript means that a variable defined outside a function can be accessible inside another function. That is what a lexical scope. Let's get started with an example to understand more about a lexical scope. Let's create a function, outer, outer function. Let's create another function, inner function, and let's call a outer function. And now let's declare a variable inside the outer function. first name. am I am from the outer function. Let's let inner variable. uh, I am from the inner function. Let's call the inner function. So when we are running our code, what will happen? Oh, we created a variables, but we forgot to access those variables. We have called the function, but we have not accessed the variable. Now let's try to access the variable. Let's say console.log. Let's call the first name, and let's call the inner function console.log in a variable. Let's save the program, format the code, save it, and run our code. Okay, the moment we ran our code, what happened? Lexical scope, a variable though that are declared outside of the function can be accessed inside that function, but the variable those are declared inside that function cannot be able to access and outside of that function. So this is all about a lexical scope. One variable you will be able to access inside the innermost function. Let me give another. Let's create another function third function. And now this time we will try to access the inner variable inside the third function. Okay, console.log inner variable, and we will try to call this third function inside our inner variable. Okay, so here what we are doing is we created an outer function, and inside our outer function we created one function scope variable. Inside that we created an another function where we are able to access the outer variable, and inside that inner function we created an another function where we are able to access an outer function variable. But when we try to access this inside the function, let's say the third function, let's say const x is equals to a 10. Okay, and the moment we are trying to access this x outside, we won't be able to access. So this is nothing but your block scope. This is your function scope. Your function scope variable can be accessed anywhere inside the function. That is nothing but console.log, and I am trying to access this inside the same function. Let's just collapse this one. So I'm trying to access the variable first name inside the a function inside that same function, and I'm trying to access the another function outer function variable inside an inner function. So this is nothing but your lexical scope. And we have a third function where we declared another variable, and we are trying to access this variable outside of that function. That is nothing but a function variable can be accessed within this function. I can console log of this x, I will be able to access it. But when I try to access the same variable outside of this one, I won't be able to access because that is considered as a block scope. So here in this example you can see we have a combination of a function scope, lexical scope, and the block scope. Now let's run the program and see what is the output that we will be able to get. Let's clear the terminal and run the code. We got a reference error for an inner variable. Where are we accessing an inner variable? Console log inner variable reference inner variable is not defined. So the error we are getting it from where? An inner variable. Inner variable is declared here, but we are trying to access that inner variable is declared inside the inner function, and we are trying to access the variable which is declared with a let and which has a block scope, and we won't be able to access them outside of that function. Hence we will be getting an error. So let's remove this one and here when I run the code, I will be also getting an error over here because the x is a block scope and it is declared within that function. I can access the variable inside this, but I won't be access the same x outside of this function. So let me just comment out this one and let's see the positive scenario of this example, whether we are able to see an output. So when I ran a program, I got the output. First, it says I am from an outer function. That is nothing but our first, when we ran the code, our first console log got printed. Then it calls an inner function. When you go to an inner function, when we come to an inner function, inside an inner function, we have a console log. It calls a third function. Inside the inner function, we are calling a third function, where inside the third function, the first console log is the x, which prints the value of the 10. And then we have another console log, which is an inner variable, which prints a value of an inner function that says I am from an inner function. So this is all about a scope in our JavaScript. So in this video, we have learned about a global scope, function scope, block scope, and lexical scope. If you have any doubt about this video, do comment out and I'll try to clarify those questions. If you like the video, do follow it. Thank you.